Hello everyone, welcome back to Economics with Mubdiul. I hope you have watched our previous two lecture because today's topic builds directly on them. In lecture 1, we have answered the question, what is economics? We have learned that economics is a study of how people make choices because resources are limited while human wants are unlimited. In lecture 2, we have discussed two very important concepts, opportunity cost and the production possibility frontier. We have learned that every choice has a cost, and the production possibility frontier shows us that producing more of one good usually means producing less of another. Now, today's lecture answers an even bigger question. Suppose you are running an entire country, not just your family, not just a business, an entire nation. The resources are limited. People want food, they want hospitals, they want schools, roads, electricity, internet, employment, clean water, better healthcare. Can the government provide everything to everyone immediately? The answer is no. And that's where today's topic begins. Today's lecture is called Central Problems of an Economy. These are the three biggest questions every economy in the world must answer, whether it is India, the United States, Japan, China, or even a small island nation. Every economy faces the three same questions. By the end of today's lecture, you will understand why these questions are so important and how different countries answer them differently. So let's begin. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to identify the three central problems that every economy faces, understand what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, compare capitalist, socialist, and mixed economic systems, and understand how different systems solve the central problems differently. So, our first objective is to identify the three central problems that every economy faces. Notice something interesting. Slide says every economy. It does not matter whether a country is rich or poor, developed or developing, large or small, every country has to answer these questions. Our second objective is understanding the three famous questions of economics. They are what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. These look like simple questions, but when government answer them incorrectly, millions of people can be affected. Imagine producing too many luxury cars while people do not have enough food, or producing advanced weapons while hospitals lack medicine. These are economic decisions. Our third objective is to compare different economic systems. You will learn how a capitalist economy, a socialist economy, and a mixed economy answer these same questions differently. It is like asking three different chefs to prepare the same dish. Each chef has a different method. Similarly, each economic system has a different way of solving economic problems. Finally, we will understand why India follows a mixed economy. Many students memorize this particular fact, but today you will understand why India adopted this system. Understanding is always better than memorizing. Now the question becomes, why do these problems exist in the first place? Why does not every country simply produce everything people want? Let's understand that. Because resources are scarce, every economy must decide how to use them wisely. These are called the central problems of an economy. They apply to every country, rich or poor, big or small. So everything that we have studied so far leads to this particular slide. Let us connect today's lecture with our previous lectures. Remember the first lesson we have learned in economics that resources are limited. Human wants are unlimited. This mismatch is scarcity. Now think about your own family. Suppose your family's monthly income is rupees 40,000. Can your family buy everything they want? A new car, a vacation, a bigger house, latest smartphones, expensive clothes? Probably not. Why? Because the income is limited. The family has to decide how to spend the money wisely. Now imagine the same situation at the national level. Instead of rupees 40,000, imagine the government of India preparing the union budget. The government also has limited resources. It collects taxes, it borrows money, it earns revenue, but these resources are still limited. Now think about all the things that government has to provide. Schools, universities, hospitals, roads, railways, defense, police, agriculture, digital infrastructure, environmental protection, subsidies, employment programs. Can it spend equally on everything? The answer is no. It must decide. That is why economists say every economy must decide how to use scarce resource wisely. These decisions are called the central problems of economy. Central problems of economy. Now notice these problems apply to every country. Many students think that only poor countries face scarcity. That is not true. Even the richest countries have limited resources. The United States has to decide how much to spend on healthcare versus defense. Japan has to decide whether to invest more in technology or support an aging population. India has to decide between expanding infrastructure, improving education, strengthening healthcare, and protecting the environment. Even billionaire makes choices. Suppose someone has rupees 100 crore. Can they buy everything in the world? The answer is no. Even their time is limited. They must choose where to invest. So scarcity is universal. That is why economics is called the science of choice. So remember the complete chain. It begins with unlimited wants, which leads to scarcity, which leads to choice, and then it leads to the central problems of economy. Now that we have studied until now, naturally leads what leads to today's topic. Now that we know why these problems exist, let us study the first central problem every economy faces. What should be produced? Or in simple word, what to produce? This sounds like a very simple question. You might think, just produce whatever people need. But there is a problem. People need a lot of things, and as we have already established, resources are limited. So an economy cannot produce everything in unlimited quantities. It has to choose, and that brings us to the first central problem. What goods and services should be produced, and how much of each should be produced? Notice that there are two questions that are hidden inside this one question, what to produce. First is what should we produce, and the second, how much should we produce. Let us understand both. Imagine you are responsible for allocating the resources of an entire country. You have land, workers, factories, machines, money, natural resources, but they are all limited. Now you have to decide where these resources should go. Should you produce more foods or more cars? Or should you construct schools or shopping malls? Should you produce medicine or smartphones? Should you build hospitals or highways? Should the country invest in defense equipment or public transportation? Every option may be useful, but the problem is you cannot produce unlimited quantities of all of them. That's where the choice becomes necessary. For example, let us take the example of farmer. Suppose there is a farmer. The farmer owns say 10 acres of land. Suppose he has two options. He can grow either food crops like rice and wheat, or he can grow cash crops. Cash crops are crops primarily produced for sale and income rather than directly for farmers' own consumption. So farmer has to decide what should I produce. Suppose growing rice will help provide food, but another crop might earn him more money in the market. Now you might say, why does not he grow both? He certainly could divide the land, but even then, another questions appear. How much land should be allocated to each crop? 5 acres to rice and 5 acres to other crop, 7 and 3, 8 and 2. Again, choice. That is exactly the problem we are discussing. Connecting it to the opportunity cost, and notice how lecture 2 comes back here. Suppose the farmer allocates all the 10 acres to one crop. What happens to the other crop he should have produced? He sacrifices it. That becomes an opportunity cost. So scarcity creates choices, and choices creates opportunity cost. And when we are making these choices at the level of entire economy, they become the central problems of an economy. Now let us take the second example from the slide. Should a country build more hospitals or more highways? The health department says, say, we need more hospital. The transport department says we need better highways. Now here is the interesting thing. Both of them are correct. Hospitals are important, but highways are also important. A hospital can save lives, but roads connect villages and cities. Roads allow businesses to transport goods. Farmers can take products to market. People can travel to workplaces, and ironically, you will also need roads to reach hospital. So which one should the government choose? There is not always an easy answer. That's precisely why it is an economic problem. The government has to consider people's need, available resources, existing infrastructure, priorities, and expected benefits. Then it decide how much should go toward each. This brings us to the second part. Knowing what to produce is not enough. We must also need to decide how much. Suppose a country decide we need hospital. Fine. How many? 10, 100, 1000. Suppose we decide we need more schools. Again, how many? The same applies to private businesses. Imagine a company manufacturing smartphones. It predicts demand for 1 lakh smartphones, but instead it produces 10 lakh phones. What happens if people do not buy them? Warehouses fill up, money gets stuck in the inventory, resources are wasted. Now consider the opposite. People want 10 lakh phones, but the company produces only 1 lakh. What happens? There is a shortage. Therefore, deciding the quantity is just as important as deciding the product. There is another useful way to understand what to produce. Economies must decide how many resources should go towards consumer goods and how many towards capital goods. Consumer goods satisfy our wants directly, the food, clothes, phones, furniture. Capital goods helps us produce other goods, machines, factory equipment, production infrastructure. Imagine an economy spends everything producing consumer goods today. People may enjoy higher consumption immediately, but if it does not invest enough in machines and productive capacity, the future production may suffer. On the other hand, if it concentrates heavily on capital goods and ignore the present consumption, people's immediate needs may go unmet. Again, trade off. So the economy has to find a balance. Now think about this situation. Suppose a government has enough additional funds to prioritize one of these, a new government hospital or a new highway. Which one should it choose? and more importantly, why. There is not necessarily one answer without knowing the circumstances. Tell me your choice in the comments and explain your reasoning. That's what I want you to learn from economics. Not simply what is the correct answer, but what did I, why did I choose this particular answer? So whenever an exam asks what is the problem of what to produce, remember it means deciding which goods and services should be produced and how much of it should be produced. That's it. But wait, our economy has finally decided what to produce. Problem solved? Not quite, because now another question appears. Suppose we have decided to produce something. How are we going to produce it? Using machines or workers? And that takes us directly to our central problem, how to produce. The economy has decided what it wants, but now it must decide how should we actually make it. In economics, we are choosing the method or technique to use for production. Let's make this extremely simple. Imagine I tell you to that we need to dig a large hole. There are different ways of doing it. I could give 100 people shovels and ask them to dig. Or I could bring in one excavator and have few people operate it. Both methods achieve the same basic goal, but the way the work is done is completely different. That's the problem of how to produce. There are two important terms on this slide that you should remember, that is labor intensive and capital intensive. Now let us understand them. Now labor intensive method uses relatively more workers in the production process. Suppose you are running a garment factory. You employ hundred of workers to cut fabric, stitch the clothes, check quality, pack the products, and perform other production tasks. You are relying heavily on human labor. That is labor intensive production. A capital intensive method, on the other hand, relies more on machines, equipment, automation, and technology. Imagine another garment factory. Instead of hundreds of workers performing every task manually, it uses sophisticated machines and automated system. That's capital intensive production. Which one is better, machines or workers? You might immediately say machines. Machines can be faster, they do not ask for lunch breaks, and they certainly do not message the manager saying, Sir, fever today cannot come. But economics would not let us escape that easily, because the answer is it depends. Suppose you are running a factory in a country where labor is scarce and expensive, workers are difficult to find, but machines are readily available. Capital intensive production might make sense. Now consider another country. There are millions of unemployed people looking for jobs. Labor is readily available. Machines are relatively expensive. Would replacing workers with machine always be the best social decision in that country? Not necessarily. And this connects directly to the example on the slide. A developing country may prefer labor intensive methods to create jobs. The question is why? Because unemployment can be a major economic challenge. Suppose a project can be completed either using 1,000 workers or 20 machine and 100 workers. From a purely technical perspective, machines might be faster. But policy makers might also consider employment. If the country has a large unemployed workforce, using a more labor intensive technique may create jobs and income for families. Then that's why the choice of production technique is not purely about technology. Economic and social circumstances matter. Now let us take another example. Imagine there are two restaurants. Restaurant A employs people to take orders, prepare food, serve customers, and collect payments. Restaurant B uses digital ordering, automatic kiosks, machines, and self-service systems. They are both producing essentially the same service, food for customers, but their technique of production is different. That's how to produce. So when deciding how to produce, producers may consider things such as the availability of workers, availability of workers, then machines, then relative costs, then nature of production, and the desired output. The objective is to choose a technique appropriate to the resources and circumstances available. Again, notice our chain. Why do we have to choose between machines and workers? Because resources are limited. If everything were unlimited, we would not care. Because capital and labor are scarce, producers must decide how to combine them. So once again, scarcity, choice, and this central problem. Now let me ask you a question. Imagine you own a small business. You can either hire 10 additional workers or purchase a machine that performs the same work. Which would you choose? Don't immediately answer. Ask yourself how expensive the machine is, what are the wages, how productive are the workers, how reliable is the technology, what type of product am I producing? And that's economic thinking. So for your examination, remember this simple distinction. What to produce is equal to choosing the goods and services and their quantities. How to produce is choosing the production technique. And the two broad techniques discussed here are labor intensive and capital intensive. Labor intensive means relatively more workers, and capital intensive means relatively more machines or capital. We have answered two questions. What should we produce and how should we produce it? But there is still one major question left. Suppose we successfully produced everything. Food is available, clothes are available, cars are available, houses are available, healthcare is available. Now comes perhaps the most socially important question. Who gets them? Or in economic terminology, for whom should we produce? And that is our third central problem. This question is about distribution. We have already produced the goods. Now the question is who will receive them? Think about this. Imagine an economy produces 1 million bag of rice. Should everyone receive the same quantity? Should those who can pay more get more? Should poor families receive government support? These are difficult questions. Economics does not only study production, it also studies distribution. Imagine your mother bakes one large birthday cake. There are 8 people in your family. How should the cake be divided? Should everyone receive an equal piece? Should children receive more? Should the birthday person receive the biggest slice? There is not one universally correct answer. The important question is, or the important point is, that someone has to decide how the cake is distributed. And economy faces exactly the same problem, except instead of cake, it is distributing food, houses, education, healthcare, clothes, electricity, and countless other goods and services. Now let us look at the first example on our slide. Should luxury goods be available to everyone or only to the rich? First, let us understand what luxury goods are. Luxury goods are products that are not essential for survival. For example, luxury cars, designer watches, premium smartphones, private yachts, luxury hotels. Can everyone afford them? Usually, no. In a market economy, people with higher incomes can generally buy more luxury goods because they have greater purchasing power. This brings us back to our question. Should market alone decide who gets luxury good, or should government intervene in some way? Different economic systems answer this question differently, which we will discuss in the next slide. Now let us look at the second example. Should government subsidize food for the poorer household? Now what is subsidy? A subsidy is a financial assistance provided by the government to reduce the prices consumers pay or reduce the um, cost producers incur. Let's understand this through a simple example. Suppose rice normally costs rupees 50 per kilogram. Many poor families cannot afford it. The government decides to support these families by providing rice at a much lower price through public distribution system. Who pays the difference? The government. Why? Because the food is considered an essential necessity. This is one way government solves the problem of for whom to produce. Instead of allowing only purchasing power to determine the distribution, governments sometimes intervene to improve the access for poorer section of society. Let us take another example. Suppose there is only one hospital in a village. Should treatment be given to the only to people who can pay, or should the government ensure basic health care for everyone? Again, this is not a production problem. The hospital already exists. This is a distribution problem. Who should receive the service? Similarly, think about government schools. Education costs money, teachers have to be paid, buildings must be maintained, books have to be printed. Yet the government often provide education either free or at very low cost. Why? Because education is considered important for society as a whole. This is another example of solving the problem of distribution. So remember, the third central problem asks who gets the goods and services that have been produced, or more simply, how should society distribute its limited resources? Now, let us suppose a country develops a life-saving medicine. Only 1 lakh doses are available, but 5 lakh people need it. Who should receive it first? Children, senior citizens, the doctors, or those who can pay, or those who are most seriously ill? There is no easy answer, and that is exactly why economists study distribution. Now we have studied all the three central problems, but here is another important question. Who actually make these decisions? The government, businesses, consumers? The answer depends on the economic system. Let's see how. Different countries answered them differently, and that's because they follow different economic system. Let us understand them one by one. The first system is capitalist economy. In this system, the market forces allows us to make the decision. That means that the forces of demand and supply determine what get produced, how it get produced, and for whom it get produced. Imagine a company notices that millions of people want electric cars. What will it do? It will produce more electric cars. Why? Because consumers are demanding it. Similarly, if people stop buying CDs and start streaming music online, companies gradually stop producing CDs. The market itself sends the signal, and that is why capitalism or capitalist economic system is often known as market economy. Market economy. Now let us look at the second system, that is the socialist economy. Here the government plays a major role. Instead of private companies deciding everything, the government plans the production. It decides what should be produced, how much, where, and how often should good be distributed. These slides mention the former USSR as an example. In such systems, the government attempted to ensure that essential goods and services were available according to the central plans rather than the market demand. Now, let's come to the system that is followed by India, the mixed economy. The word mixed gives us the clue. It combines elements of both capitalism and socialism. Private businesses are free to produce many goods. At the same time, government also plays an important role. It regulates the market, provides public services, supports welfare program, and intervenes where necessary. Instead of choosing one system, India combines both. Imagine you are selecting a cricket team. Would you choose only batsmen? No. Only bowlers? No. A balanced team needs both. Similarly, a mixed economy tries to combine the strength of both systems. Market encourage innovation and competition, and government works towards social welfare and public service. Now, a quick revision. In capitalist economy system, the market decide. In socialist economic system, the government decide. In mixed economic system, both market and government participate. That's the easiest way to remember these three systems. Now let us connect everything to our own country. India follows a mixed economy. But what does that actually mean? It means both private sector and government plays important role. Let us understand with this example. Think about your daily life. When you buy toothpaste, clothes, mobile phones, biscuits, or television, who usually produces them? Mostly private companies. These firms compete with each other. They try to offer better quality, better prices, and better services. Now, think of about sectors such as national defense, public welfare programs, and major public infrastructure. Here, the government has an important role because these services are considered essential for society. The government also introduced schemes to support vulnerable groups, improve education, strengthen healthcare, and promote public welfare. This combination of private enterprise and government intervention is what makes India a mixed economy. You might ask, why does not India choose only one system? Because both systems have strengths and limitations. Markets are efficient in many situations, but they may not always ensure equal access to essential services. Government can promote social welfare, but excessive control may reduce flexibility and efficiency. A mixed economy attempts to balance these objectives. So, today we have learned something that is very important. Every economy faces same three central problems, but different economic systems answer them differently. and India solves them through a mixed economy where market and government both play important roles. Now it is your turn. We have spent the last 35 minutes discussing the three central problems of an economy. But learning economics is not just about listening, it is about thinking. So let's test ourselves. The first question says, which central problem is involved when government decides to subsidize rice for poor families? Take a few seconds and think. Pause the video if needed. What is the government deciding here? Is it deciding what to produce? No. The rice has already been produced. Is it deciding how to produce? No. The production method has already been chosen. So what's left? The government is deciding who should receive the rice at a lower price. That is for whom to produce problem. Because this question is about distribution. Now let us move to the second question. Give one real life example of what to produce and how to produce decision. I will give you one example. Suppose a bakery owner has limited resources. He asks, should I bake more bread or more cakes? That's what to produce. Suppose he decides to bake bread. Now he asked, should I use traditional manual baking method or should I install modern automatic baking machines? That's how to produce. See the difference. The first question is about choosing the product and second question is about production technique. Now I would like you to do something. Look around your surrounding, maybe your home, maybe your college, maybe your workplace. Try to identify one example of each central problem. For example, if your family is planning the monthly budget, ask yourself, what should we spend money on? How should we spend it? Who should receive financial support first? Economics is happening all around us. The more you observe, the better you will understand this subject. So write your answers in the comments. I will personally try to read as many comments possible. Who knows, your example might help another student understand economics better. Learning becomes more interesting when we discuss ideas together. Let's quickly revise everything that we have learned today. Whenever you revise economics, always try to connect the ideas instead of memorizing isolated definitions. Let us begin from very start. We have learned that resources are scarce. Because resources are limited, every economy must make choices. These choices give rise to the three central problems of economy. The first problem is what to produce. This means deciding which goods and services should be produced and how much of each should be produced. The second problem is how to produce. This means choosing the most appropriate production technique. Should we use more labor or more machine? The answer depends on country's resources and technology and economic condition. The third problem is for whom to produce. This is about distributing goods and services among people who receives what. How should essential goods be shared? Should governments intervene? These are the distribution questions. When we then compared the three different economic systems, capitalism relies mainly on market forces, socialism relies mainly on government planning, and India follows a mixed economy combining both. If you remember this logical flow, you will never find this chapter difficult. Now here is a simple trick. Remember the three questions as WHF. What, how, and for whom. Whenever you see the three central problems of an economy, immediately think WHF. Today's lecture introduced the idea of different economic system, but we have only scratched the surface. In the next lecture, we'll study them in much greater detail. We will compare capitalism, socialism, and mixed economy. We'll discuss their features, advantages, disadvantages, and real world example. We will also answer an interesting question. Is capitalism so efficient? Why don't all countries follow it? If socialism promotes equality, why do not all countries adopt it? And finally, why do most modern economies, including India, follow some form of mixed economy? We will answer all these questions in our next lecture, so don't miss it. This brings us to the end of today's lecture. I hope you understand why economists call these three central problems of an economy. These are not just examination topic. These questions that government, businesses, and even families answer every single day. Whenever you hear about a government budget, a company launching a new product, or a policy that supports poor household, try asking yourself which central problem is being addressed. If you start thinking like this, you will begin to see economics everywhere. And that's my goal for this particular series. Not just to help you pass examinations, but to help you understand the world through the eyes of an economist. If you found this lecture useful, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, share it with your friends and classmates, and subscribe to Economic with Mubdiul. Your support helps this channel reach more students and motivates me to continue creating free and high quality economic lectures. Thank you so much for watching. I am Mubdiul Hassan and I will see you in the next lecture. Until then, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, economics is not just a subject, it is a way of thinking.